Good morning, and welcome to our second episode of Van Spirit. Today we are coming from the Kickapoo Valley Reserve in Wisconsin's driftless region. It's called driftless because the last ice age had glaciers that moved through this area and cut deep valleys into the rock bed, which today form this beautiful rolling backdrop. And welcome again to what we're calling Van Spirit, an exploration of some of the spiritual aspects of van life. Simple living, mindfulness, accountability to something larger than ourselves. When you're living in a tiny van amidst the grandeur of all this, it's easy to feel that immensity. It's an opportunity we don't want to pass up. It's about finding balance between contemplation and recreation. I'm Bret, and this is my spouse Cindy, and we've just started our year living in this van. We spent about 10 years towing teardrop trailers on vacations whenever we could get them. But for living full-time, we decided to upgrade to a pre-built Class B van. And we decided on a Class B van instead of building one on our own, which I've been planning for years now. But it came down to we wanted to get on the road now instead of waiting 6 months or more to build a van. That's our next project this coming year, which we are going to, based on simplicity. We're going to try to do a simplicity build that incorporates intentionality, DIY, and something you don't see all that often in van life videos, being really skeptical of some of the consumerism and materialism that's creeping into what's essentially an attempt to live smaller and more lightly. So, Cindy, what excites you about this thing that we're about to do as we head out on the road?
Yeah, well, I think the most exciting thing, there's a lot to be excited about, but I think the most exciting thing is getting out and exploring the lands of North America. We've been to a lot of state parks, but there's so many here, state, national, that we want to explore more.
For this episode, we wanted to start with something very basic and also something that's very complex. And that's the land on which we're going to be driving. Every mile of it is land stolen from people who used to live here. And it's important to us to be aware of this, not for the sake of feeling guilt, but for the opportunity to become more aware and more respectful. I used to go to a religious conference every single year, every single summer, and at our openings, we would devote time to acknowledge the history and complexity of how we got to that place, that geographic location. We would often invite local indigenous people to tell their stories. And if they wanted to offer prayers, we would receive them from them gratefully. These histories were often difficult to hear and consider, but that's the tough work of being better allies to people who have been oppressed since the arrival of Europeans, including my ancestors, to this continent.
When I'm on First Nations land, I love nature anyway, so as I'm looking at the trees, at the flowers, at the animals around, I'm taking them in with my eyes, but I also think about, what the Ho-Chunk people did here in this space that we're in right now. What they did with these trees that look like they're perfectly like in a semicircle. The different plants that I know have been, the flowers and herbs that have been used in medicine, how they use them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the land must have looked very different. Perhaps not so coiffed in a semicircle, this campsite, maybe not a gravel road, but maybe different modes of transportation. So it's I think it's a good exercise, like you're saying, to imagine what this land was before we were here. And when we talk about the oppression of Native peoples, it's right here on the Kickapoo. This land, as early as 1930, the army was planning to dam up this valley and to try to create better flood control for the town of LaFarge downstream, for the white people, so they didn't get flooded. So they moved over the next, between the 1930s and 1950s, I think, they were moving people off the land. Some people they bought out, some people they just condemned their property and condemned this whole valley and moved everyone out. There's about 135 families that were moved off and displaced off of this land. In 1966, the Army Corps of Engineers reconsidered, and by 1975, so we're talking like decades and decades and decades, they decided it was a bad idea. Sorry, we're not going to do this after all. At that point, the state of Wisconsin deeded this land back to the Ho-Chunk Nation, and today it is, through their generosity, it's shared for all to come here and camp. This is a dispersed camping environment, so they let you come and share this land with them, and with that, they share their story, which we're now sharing with you.
The information that I know about First Peoples is what I got in books. So reading in books. So that doesn't mean everything is shared. So I like to also go about, being on the land with a curiosity of what, even more than just envisioning them and what they did on this land, but what everything symbolized to them.
Yeah, and something we learned at the Visitors Interpretive Center was that the Ho-Chunk people had divided themselves into clans. Coyote Clan, and we thought about that last night when we heard that howling coyote, and Bear Clan and Beaver Clan, and there were 12 different clans.
Coyote, Eagle, Hawk.
And they all had different roles and responsibilities based on that animal and and I guess its traits. So it was really, really interesting, again, to have gone to the interpretive. So as you go through your van life and journeys, don't pass up the visitor centers or the interpretive centers, because that's where you're going to get this information. We never would have kind of thought through all of this if we hadn't been there and hadn't allowed ourselves to be a little bit educated. And yeah, so as you drive around in your van or you're in your hometown, if you're not out on the road, I invite you to become aware of the people who were here before you. And may we all find peace in what's the aftermath of so much ignorance and violence. And may we anchor at least some of that peace in the now shared beauty that we get to drive through and explore.
Yep. And may all beings be happy. May all beings be well. May all beings be safe. And may all beings be peaceful and at ease.
Be well and drive on.
I should do the little love thing that Jaja and Robert do.
Love.